If you're anything like me, you probably play video games to unwind after a long day of, well, in my case, playing video games. It can be incredibly cathartic to immerse yourself in the many worlds of your beloved titles, and can help you forget about all the stresses of modern-day life. That is, of course, until you come across a level that's so anxiety-inducing that you're forced to drink your own body weight in chamomile tea straight afterwards. For our list today, we're taking a look through all of gaming history and chronicling the moments that stressed us out the most. Whether they're controller-throwingly difficult, time-sensitive, or have life-or-death consequences for much-loved characters, they're all welcome here. It's worth noting before we proceed, though, that we can't talk about the vast majority of these games without covering some major plot points, so a spoiler warning is very much in effect. I'm the completely zen Peter from TripleJump, and here are the 10 most stressful video game levels of all time. Number 10. Turbo Tunnel, Battletoads. We're kicking off today's list with one of the most infamous levels in gaming history, and one that's sure to bring back some mighty traumatic memories for those who tried to conquer it in their youth. There were a number of reasons that Battletoads' third level had players throwing their NES controllers in blind rage. Firstly, the stage was littered with hazards that needed to be jumped over or avoided altogether, with each misstep costing a life. Lose all of your lives, and it's back to the start. The second issue was that said obstacles came at players at breakneck speeds, meaning they only had a second or two to react before their speeder and the toad riding it splattered against a fast-approaching wall. Throw into the mix some occasionally janky controls, and you've got a recipe for a many-tiered stress cake. It's no wonder that most players never finish the game. Oh, and if you're feeling bad about your video game prowess thanks to Turbo Tunnel, you'll be pleased to know that one speedrunner was able to complete it in 2018 without losing any lives and with a bag on his head. Maybe we all just need to, get good. Number 9. Phantom Express, Cuphead. If you've played the 2017 indie darling Cuphead, you'll know that the entire experience is incredibly stressful. On first glance, you might think that Cuphead is a cutesy, child-friendly affair that's unlikely to pose a challenge, even to the biggest of noobs. But play for just a moment or two, and you'll find out just how wrong you were. Whilst playing craps in the Devil's Casino, the devil himself appears to Cuphead and his brother Mugman, and offers them all of the casino's riches if they can win one more game. When they lose, they beg for mercy and are told they might be spared if they can collect the soul contracts from a bunch of runaway debtors. All of the levels in Cuphead are absolute nails, but the Phantom Express is something else altogether. Players are confined to a small platform as they attempt to best not one, but 4 deadly enemies, and must focus on dealing damage, avoiding projectiles, and not falling off the tiny railroad car. Oh, and don't forget that your pool of health is very limited, so a small slip-up could mean having to start all over again. With so many things to pay attention to, it's no surprise this level gives players a massive headache. A cup headache, yeah? No. Number 8. The Microwave Corridor, Metal Gear Solid 4, Guns of the Patriots. As you probably know, microwaves can be stressful at the best of times. It's a real juggling act trying to ensure your soup is heated all the way through without exploding it all over the place, and cleaning up the microwave afterwards is always a nightmare. Honestly, save yourself some trouble and just get a meal deal instead. However, there is no one who knows what a pain in the arse microwaves can be better than Metal Gear Solid 4 Guns of the Patriots protagonist, Old Snake. In order to access the server room on the Outer Haven, Snake is forced to make his way through a corridor lined with microwave-emitting weaponry. The sequence is horrible for players who are forced to guide Snake through the passage, watching on helplessly as his health bar slowly depletes. As he presses forward, he's forced to crawl along the ground in order to make it to the end, all while his armor literally melts away from him. Watching Snake's life slowly drain as his comrades fail to hold their ground against the Haven troopers truly is a nail-biting experience, and one that left most players in serious need of a little lie-down and some soothing whale sounds. Number 7. Dark Bramble, Outer Wilds. As video games go, Outer Wilds is probably amongst some of the less anxiety-inducing for the most part. Of course, when you make it as far as Dark Bramble, though, things take a turn for the stressful. The planet is located at the far end of the overworld, and though it doesn't need to be explored until near the end of the game, players will need to tackle it eventually. The problems with Dark Bramble are several-fold. Firstly, the entire planet is shrouded in mist, which makes it difficult for players to see where they're going. Furthermore, as the name might suggest, Dark Bramble is a tangle of thorny vines, and if players aren't careful, they'll find themselves skewered upon one of the thousands of sharp barbs. As though all of that weren't enough though, the planet is also inhabited by giant razor-toothed anglerfish, and although they might be blind, they are rather unfortunately not deaf, and the slightest noise can bring them down on the player's craft. The whole thing is complete nightmare fuel, and will have players on the edge of their seats as they try desperately to curb the use of their engines, lest they end up as fish food. Number 6. Everything after the first couple of days. Papers, please. What's that? Everything after the first couple of days? Well, I'd call that a wild card! Oh, aren't we naughty? When you first start playing Papers, Please, the whole thing seems straightforward. You get given criteria that those wishing to enter the country must meet, and you simply need to process people one by one. If they have the necessary credentials, great. If not, then they'll need to head back to wherever they came from. Things go from 0 to 100 pretty quickly though, as more and more rules get added each day. It's hard enough trying to keep on top of everything you need to check, but when you also remember you're on a time limit, you're only paid for the people you process, and any mistakes will result in lost earnings, you'll find your blood pressure rapidly rising. To make matters worse, failure results not only in your own suffering, but that of your family as well. Letting in that nice woman who didn't have a valid passport might have seemed like a good idea at the time, but now you're going to have to choose between eating and getting little Timmy his medicine. Maybe tomorrow, little Timmy, everyone's hungry. Just please try not to die in the night. That will have been a waste of your meal. Number 5. The Keeper, the Evil Within. It's fair to say that on the whole, The Evil Within is an incredibly tense game, and it's probably not for those of a sensitive disposition. That said, even those with the coolest of heads might find themselves getting het up when it comes to facing The Keeper, a fearsome boss that will challenge even the most accomplished multitaskers. After placing the missing pieces into the concrete mural, players make the descent to meet their foe, but besting him isn't as simple as just firing your weapon at him. First, players need to make their way along a corridor lined with barbed wire traps. You'll have to move quickly though, as spiked ceilings begin descending upon unlucky protagonist Sebastian. The ordeal is far from over though, as players will then find themselves trapped in a room that's quickly filling with gas. The only way to prevent a somewhat fumey death is to turn off all of the valves, but a certain box-headed boss keeps springing up to prevent players from doing so. Taking the Keeper down isn't all that hard to do, but the fact he keeps respawning, coupled with the ever-filling poison meter, makes this level a massively anxiety-inducing experience for all who try to brave it. Number 4. House Beneviento, Resident Evil Village. Over the years, the Resident Evil series has given players a veritable smorgasbord of terrifying stalking enemies. But although the likes of Mr. X and Nemesis got our pulses racing, they don't hold a candle to the blood pressure elevating horror that lies within House Beneviento. When Ethan first enters the house, nothing seems to be out of the ordinary. Pressing on takes him down below into the basement, and he'll find a room in which Angie the puppet is sat holding a rose flask. Brilliant, players might think as they grab it. 2 down, 2 to go. And not so fast, young grasshopper, because here's where the fun begins. Suddenly, everything goes dark, and when the lights come back on, all of Ethan's weapons and items have been taken. In order to escape the basement, he must solve a series of puzzles and find the fuse for the lift. Everything goes swimmingly, right up until he retrieves the breaker box key, at which point he unleashes a giant deformed bloodthirsty fetus. Yes, you heard that correctly. Cue several minutes of sheer panic as you try to avoid the grotesque monstrosity hiding under beds or in cupboards to ensure it doesn't catch up to Ethan and eat him. We can honestly say we've never been so happy to get in a lift. Number 3. Stormy Ascent, Crash Bandicoot, the Insane Trilogy. There were a number of Crash Bandicoot levels that were strong contenders for this list. Hog Wild is a bit of a nightmare, Spaced Out can get in the bin, and who can forget the console-smashing difficulty of the High Road. All of those, though, pale in comparison to Stormy Ascent, a level that's seen many controllers flying through many a window over the years. The premise of the level is thus: everyone's favourite video game marsupial Crash must find his way to the top of a castle and overcome the numerous obstacles that are barring his way. On paper, this sounds much like any other Crash Bandicoot level, but in practice, Stormy Ascent is an incredibly tricky beast. Moving platforms, spike traps, and vanishing staircases all mean that players need pinpoint accuracy when it comes to timing their maneuvers. There are also potion-throwing scientists and handsy prisoners to avoid, so not only do players need to carefully traverse the ever-changing level, but they also have to ensure they don't get taken out by flying purple goo. Stormy Ascent wasn't included in the PlayStation release of Crash Bandicoot because it was deemed too difficult, and anyone that's tried to best it whilst playing the Insane Trilogy probably cursed Vicarious Visions for resurrecting it. Number 2. Eye Surgery, Dead Space 2. We've all heard the phrase, "I'd rather stick pins in my eyes," but if you've ever played Dead Space 2, then the words take on a whole new meaning. Dead Space 2 is already a fairly stressful game, but the sequence in which players are forced to stick a ginormous needle straight into the eye of protagonist Isaac Clarke sent most people's anxiety levels through the roof. Towards the end of the game, Isaac is in desperate need of some data that will help him get the upper hand on the beasties he's fighting. Rather than using, say, a flash drive, though, Isaac is forced to retrieve the data by having it inserted directly into his brain. There's no time to call in a surgeon or remove bits of skull, though, so Isaac instead has to clamber into a machine that will feed him the necessary info via a needle straight through his eyeball. However, this doesn't play out in a cutscene, and instead, players are made to perform the surgery themselves by carefully guiding the massive needle towards Isaac's constantly moving eye. If they fail to hit the intended mark, then poor Isaac suffers a horrifically gory death. I sure hope you've all got nice, steady hands. And number 1, the Suicide Mission, Mass Effect 2. When a stage in a game is literally called the Suicide Mission, you know you're going to be in for a rough time. Most who have played the Mass Effect trilogy will agree that the games are amongst the best of all time, and that's thanks in large part to their outstanding writing. Over the course of the first 2 titles, players spend a lot of time undertaking missions to ensure that the Normandy and its crew are prepared for the final battle. This includes rebuilding the crew and earning their loyalty, and it's unsurprising that after spending hours and hours with them all, many players become quite attached. When the end of Mass Effect 2 rolls around, Shepard and the gang set out on the Suicide Mission, a daring counterattack against the Collectors that sees the crew heading straight into the heart of their territory. There are some weighty choices presented throughout the Mass Effect series, but those within the Suicide Mission really do take the cake, as one misstep can get beloved crew members killed, and once they're gone, that's it. It's little wonder that players found the stage so stressful. Praying you've done enough to prepare the team and trying to make the right decisions that won't get anyone killed is enough to give anyone a panic attack.